I'm Mia, 29, and I'm standing in a Seiki deposit box room, holding a deed to a lakeside property worth over $500,000. Property my stepbrothers think they own. Property they're planning to sell tomorrow. My hands are shaking so badly, I can barely read the words naming me as the sole, legal owner. You have until Friday to get your worthless things and get out, my older stepbrother had sneered just yesterday. After all, you're not really a walker. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Growing up as the forgotten member of the Walker family meant I was always fighting for a place at the table, both literally and figuratively. My mother married Thomas Walker when I was 7 years old, following the death of my biological father 2 years earlier. Thomas had 2 sons from his previous marriage, Daniel and Eric, who were 9 and 11 at the time. They never accepted me, not from day one. "Dad, why does she have to live with us?" I remember overhearing Daniel ask on moving day, his voice dripping with disdain. "She's not even your real kid." Those words etched themselves into my heart, creating wounds that never fully healed. Despite their constant rejection, Thomas always showed me kindness. He wasn't the type to shower anyone with affection, his stoic demeanor a product of his military background. But he included me in family activities and never let his sons treat me poorly in his presence. My mother passed away when I was 21, following a brief but brutal battle with cancer. Thomas had been her rock throughout the illness, and though we were both devastated, it somehow brought us closer together. For the first time, I felt like I truly had a father figure who cared for me unconditionally. "Mia," he'd said at my mother's funeral, his hand heavy but comforting on my shoulder. "I know I'm not your real father, but I promised your mother I would always look after you. You'll always have a home with me." That promise had meant everything to me. I moved in with Thomas after college, helping him manage the large Victorian house that had been in his family for generations. Daniel and Eric had both moved away years before, building their own lives and rarely visiting their father except when they needed money. Thomas's health began declining 3 years ago. "Heart problems," the doctor said. I became his primary caretaker, taking him to appointments, managing his medications, and ensuring he was comfortable. During that time, we developed our own quiet routine. Evenings spent reading by the fireplace, Sunday drives to the lake, and occasional dinners out at his favorite steakhouse. He wasn't an openly affectionate man, but his appreciation showed in small ways, like the cup of coffee he'd have waiting for me each morning, or the way he'd save articles from the newspaper he thought might interest me. When he passed away in his sleep 6 weeks ago, I was devastated. In the days following his death, I walked through the house like a ghost, remembering the decade we'd spent together as a makeshift family. I never expected his death to make me homeless. 3 days after the funeral, Daniel and Eric arrived with Thomas's lawyer, Mr. Peterson, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses who seemed uncomfortable with the situation. I sat across from them in Thomas's study, the room still filled with his presence, from the leather-bound books on the shelves to the lingering scent of his pipe tobacco. "As you know, we're here to discuss the contents of Thomas's will," Mr. Peterson began, adjusting his glasses nervously. "I'll try to make this as straightforward as possible." My heart sank as he read through the document. The house, the savings, the investments, even the family heirlooms, all divided equally between Daniel and Eric. My name was never mentioned, not once in the entire document. It was as if I didn't exist, as if the past 10 years of my life had been erased with the stroke of a pen. "There must be some mistake," I whispered, my voice barely audible even to my own ears. "Thomas wouldn't just leave me with nothing." Daniel smirked, leaning back in his father's chair as if it had always belonged to him. "Why would he leave you anything? You're not a walker." "I took care of him," I argued, tears threatening to spill. "For years, while you two barely visited. Playing nurse doesn't make you family," Eric countered coldly. And it certainly doesn't entitle you to our inheritance. Mr. Peterson cleared his throat uncomfortably. I'm afraid the will is quite clear, Ms. Reed. Mr. Walker's estate is to be divided between his sons. There's no provision for you. I felt as though the floor had dropped out from beneath me. The man who had promised to always look after me had left me with nothing, not even acknowledgment. Had our relationship meant so little to him? Had I imagined the bond we shared during those quiet evenings and Sunday drives? You have until Friday to pack your things and leave, Daniel informed me with cold satisfaction. Eric and I will be selling the house, along with the lake property. The lake property? I asked, momentarily confused. Thomas had never mentioned owning property by the lake, though we'd often driven past the beautiful cabins along the shoreline, admiring them. Dad bought it a few years ago, Eric explained dismissively. Never did anything with it, just sat on it as an investment. The real estate agent says it'll fetch a pretty penny in this market. I nodded numbly, still processing the shock of my situation. In less than 2 days, I would be homeless, without savings, and completely alone in the world. The thought paralyzed me with fear. That evening, after Daniel and Eric had left to celebrate their windfall at a local bar, I began the heartbreaking task of packing up my life. Each item I placed in boxes felt like another piece of my heart breaking off. This house had been my home for a decade, and now I was being cast out like an unwanted stray. As I sorted through my belongings, deciding what to keep and what to donate given my uncertain housing situation, I realized I needed to collect the few photos of my mother that Thomas had kept in his study. Though the room now felt tainted by the memory of the will reading, I forced myself to enter, heading straight for the antique desk where Thomas kept a small collection of family photographs. The top drawer contained the expected frames, including one of my mother and Thomas on their wedding day, looking uncharacteristically happy, and another of my college graduation, where Thomas stood beside me with what I had always interpreted as pride in his eyes. Had that been real, or just another misinterpretation on my part? As I carefully removed the photos from the drawer, my fingers brushed against something taped to the underside of the drawer. Curious, I pulled the drawer out completely and turned it over to find an envelope securely attached to the bottom, my name written across it in Thomas's distinctive handwriting. With trembling fingers, I peeled the envelope free and opened it, finding several pages of Thomas's stationery inside, covered in his neat script. My dear Mia, the letter began. If you're reading this, then I've passed on, and things have likely not gone as I had hoped. I sank into Thomas's leather chair, my heart pounding as I read his words, each sentence changing everything I thought I knew about my situation. I need to apologize to you for several things, the letter continued. First, for not legally adopting you when I had the chance. Your mother and I discussed it many times. But there were complications with your biological father's family that made it difficult. That is no excuse, and it's a decision I've regretted deeply. Tears blurred my vision as I continued reading. Thomas explained that he knew his sons had never accepted me, and that they would likely contest any will that included me as an equal beneficiary. He had experienced their greed firsthand over the years, and didn't trust them to honor his wishes if I was included in the official will. So I've made other arrangements, he wrote. Arrangements that not even Peterson knows about. There is a safety deposit box at First National Bank. Box number 317. The key is taped to the back of the framed photo of you and your mother that I keep on my nightstand. The box, and everything in it, belongs to you. I immediately rushed to Thomas's bedroom, carefully removing the frame from the wall and finding the small key exactly where he said it would be. As I held it in my palm, I felt a surge of hope for the first time since his death. The letter continued with directions to the bank and instructions on how to access the box. He also expressed his deep affection for me, something he admitted he should have verbalized more often while he was alive. You became the daughter I never had, he wrote. And though I may not have shown it the way I should have, You brought joy back into my life after your mother's passing. I am proud of the woman you've become, Mia, and I hope what I've left for you will help you build the life you deserve." The letter was signed simply, Thomas, but underneath, in smaller script, he had added, "P.S. Don't let the boys bully you. You're stronger than they know." I spent that night alternating between crying and smiling, reading the letter over and over until I had practically memorized it. The next morning, I waited impatiently for the bank to open, the key clutched tightly in my hand. When I finally stood before box 317, my hands were shaking so badly that I struggled to insert the key into the lock. The bank attendant asked if I needed assistance, but I shook my head, determined to do this myself. When the lock finally turned and I opened the box, what I found inside took my breath away. The first item was a bank statement showing an account in my name with a balance of $1,200,000. There was also a folder containing legal documents, including the deed to a property, and a smaller envelope with another handwritten note from Thomas. "The cabin on Lakeshore Drive has always been yours." The note read, "I bought it 5 years ago with you in mind. I remember how your eyes lit up whenever we drove past it on our Sunday drives. I've kept it a secret from Daniel and Eric, knowing they would try to take it from you. It's registered in your name only, though I've maintained the fiction that it belongs to me. The property taxes are paid up for the next 5 years from a separate account I established for that purpose." I stared at the deed in disbelief. The address matched what Eric had mentioned, the property they were already planning to sell, believing it was part of their inheritance. But it was mine, legally and completely mine, and had been for years. The realization that Thomas had planned so carefully to protect me from his son's greed filled me with a complex mixture of emotions, joy, and sadness intertwined. He had cared for me deeply, after all, enough to create this elaborate safety net without ever telling me. As I left the bank, documents securely in my bag, and a cashier's check for a portion of the money I'd need immediately, I felt a strange sense of calm descend over me. The betrayal I'd felt upon hearing the will was being replaced by understanding. Thomas had done what he thought necessary to ensure I was provided for, even if his methods had temporarily left me feeling abandoned. The next step was clear. I needed to inform Daniel and Eric that their plans to sell the lake property would have to be canceled. It wasn't theirs to sell. It never had been. I drove to the house, finding Daniel's expensive sports car in the driveway alongside Eric's SUV. Taking a deep breath to steady my nerves, I entered what had been my home until yesterday, hearing their voices coming from the kitchen. "We could ask for $350,000, Daniel was saying. "The market's hot right now." "The agent said we could get $400 easily," Eric countered. "Maybe more if we wait until summer." I stepped into the doorway, clutching my bag containing the documents. "You won't be selling the cabin," I announced, my voice steadier than I expected. Both men turned to look at me with expressions of annoyance and surprise. "What are you doing here?" Daniel demanded. "I thought we made it clear you needed to be gone by tomorrow." I placed the deed on the kitchen table between them. "The cabin on Lakeshore Drive," I said quietly. "It's not yours to sell. It's mine. It always has been." Eric snatched up the document, his face growing increasingly red as he read it. "This is bullshit," he spat. "Dad would never give you a property worth that much." "But he did," I replied, feeling stronger with each passing moment. 5 years ago. "It's registered in my name. You can check with the county records office if you don't believe me." "He must have been manipulated," Daniel insisted, grabbing the deed from his brother. "Or he wasn't in his right mind." "We'll contest this." "On what grounds?" I asked calmly. "The property was purchased and registered in my name 5 years ago, long before Thomas's health began to decline. It was a gift, legally transferred and documented. You have no claim to it whatsoever." The brothers exchanged a panicked look, the realization that I was right slowly dawning on them. "What else did he leave you?" Eric demanded. "What else did he hide from us?" I considered telling them about the money, but Thomas's caution influenced my decision. "That's between Thomas and me," I replied, "just as the division of his estate according to the will is between him and you." Daniel slammed his hand on the table. "This is theft. You've been planning this for years, worming your way into his good graces while we were building our own lives." The accusation might have hurt me a week ago, but now I just felt pity for them. They had never known the man their father truly was, had never appreciated his quiet strength and capacity for love. "I took care of your father because I loved him," I said simply. "He was more of a parent to me than either of you allowed him to be for you. That's your loss, not mine." I gathered the deed and returned it to my bag. "I'll be taking the last of my things now," I informed them, "and I would appreciate it if you would direct any potential buyers away from my property. It's not for sale, now or ever." The look of impotent rage on their faces as I turned and walked away was something I never expected to see, much less enjoy. But there is a certain satisfaction in knowing that Thomas had found a way to have the last word after all. Over the next few days, I moved my belongings into the cabin. A beautiful A-frame structure nestled among pine trees with a stunning view of the lake. As I explored what was now my home, I discovered small touches that confirmed Thomas had indeed been preparing this place specifically for me. From the built-in bookshelves perfect for my collection of novels, to the window seat overlooking the water, something I had always dreamed of having. In the master bedroom, I found another surprise. A small safe hidden in the closet. Using the combination from Thomas's letter, my birthday, I opened it to find a collection of jewelry that had belonged to my mother, along with photos I had never seen before, capturing moments from their life together that I had missed or forgotten. There was also another note, shorter this time. "Mia, I hope this place brings you the peace you deserve. Make it your sanctuary, your home, your new beginning. With all my love, Thomas." As I sat on the dock that evening, watching the sunset paint the water in shades of gold and crimson, I felt Thomas's presence beside me, as tangible as during our Sunday drives. The pain of his loss was still there, a hollow ache in my chest that I knew would never completely fade, but it was now tempered by the knowledge that I had been loved, truly and deeply, by a man who had chosen to be my father in all the ways that mattered. 2 weeks after moving into the cabin, I received a call from Mr. Peterson, Thomas's lawyer. "Ms. Reed," he began hesitantly, "I'm calling because there seems to be some confusion regarding a property on Lakeshore Drive. Daniel and Eric Walker are insisting that it belongs to their father's estate, but the county records clearly show it's registered in your name." "That's correct," I confirmed. "Thomas transferred ownership to me 5 years ago as a gift." There was a pause before Peterson continued. "I see. This is unexpected. Thomas never mentioned this arrangement to me." "He had his reasons," I replied, thinking of the letter and Thomas's careful planning. "Is there a problem with the deed?" No problem," Peterson assured me quickly. "The transfer appears to have been handled properly. It's just that Daniel and Eric are quite upset. They're considering legal action." I had anticipated this. "On what grounds?" "The property was legally gifted to me years ago. It was never part of Thomas's estate." "That's what I've explained to them," Peterson said with a sigh. "But they're convinced there must have been some kind of undue influence on your part." The accusation stung, but I had grown stronger in the weeks since discovering Thomas's letter. "Mr. Peterson, Thomas was of sound mind when he purchased this property for me. If Daniel and Eric wish to waste their inheritance on legal fees pursuing a baseless claim, that's their decision. I have documentation supporting the legitimacy of this gift." "Documentation?" Peterson sounded surprised. "What sort of documentation?" "A letter from Thomas explaining his intentions," I said carefully, not wanting to reveal too much. "And other supporting materials. I'm confident they would be sufficient should this matter go to court, which I sincerely hope it doesn't." Peterson was quiet for a moment. "I wasn't aware Thomas had left you a letter." There's a lot about Thomas that his sons never knew, I replied softly, including how much he valued our relationship. After ending the call with Peterson, I wasn't surprised when, less than an hour later, my phone rang again, this time with Eric's number on the screen. Against my better judgment, I answered. "We know about the money," he said without preamble, his voice tight with anger. Peterson did some digging. $1,200,000, Mia? Really? You think you're entitled to that kind of money just because you played house with our father for a few years? I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath before responding. That money was a gift from Thomas, just like the cabin. He wanted to ensure I would be taken care of after he was gone. That should have been our money, Daniel chimed in, apparently on speakerphone. Our inheritance, not yours. Your inheritance was quite substantial without it, I pointed out calmly. The house alone is worth twice that amount. It's the principle, Eric insisted. You manipulated a lonely old man, isolated him from his family, and then took advantage of his declining health to secure yourself a fortune. The unfairness of the accusation made my blood boil. I never isolated Thomas from anyone. You two chose to stay away, to visit only when you needed money. I was there every day, taking care of him, keeping him company, being the family you couldn't be bothered to be. We're contesting the gift, Daniel declared. Both the money and the property. We have an appointment with our lawyer tomorrow. I sighed, suddenly tired of their greed and bitterness. Do what you feel you must, I told them. But before you waste your money on legal fees, you should know that Thomas anticipated this reaction. He left evidence of his intentions, including a detailed explanation of why he chose to provide for me outside of his will. He was worried he would contest anything that included me, which is exactly what you're doing now. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. He knew you better than you think, I continued quietly. He knew you would try to leave me with nothing, even after everything I did for him. That's why he planned this years ago, when he was in perfect health and his decisions couldn't be questioned. You're bluffing, Eric finally said, but I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. Am I? I challenged. Are you willing to risk a portion of your inheritance on that? Because I'm prepared to defend what Thomas wanted me to have. The question is, how much are you willing to lose trying to take it from me? The silence stretched out longer this time before Daniel spoke, his voice less confident than before. This isn't over. It could be, I offered. Thomas loved all three of us in his own way. He provided for all three of us. Isn't that enough? After they hung up, I sat on my deck watching the lake, wondering if the brothers would follow through on their threat. Part of me hoped they wouldn't, not because I was afraid of a legal battle, but because it would be such a waste. Another example of their inability to see beyond their own greed. To my surprise, I received a text from Eric the following evening. We've decided not to pursue legal action. The lawyer advised against it. This doesn't mean we accept what you did, but we're moving on. I read the message several times, relief washing over me. It wasn't forgiveness or acceptance, but it was an end to the conflict, and that was enough for now. In the months that followed, I settled into my new life at the cabin. Using a portion of the money Thomas had left me, I started an online business, something I had dreamed of for years but never had the capital to launch. I also donated to several charities supporting children who had lost parents, establishing a small scholarship fund in my mother's and Thomas's names. The cabin became the sanctuary Thomas had intended, a place of peace and new beginnings. I planted a garden, adopted a dog from the local shelter, a gentle golden retriever I named Tommy, and slowly built a community among my neighbors along the lakeshore. Occasionally, I would see Daniel or Eric in town, our interactions limited to stiff nods or averted gazes. I heard through local gossip that they had sold their father's house for a substantial profit and moved on with their lives, Daniel to Chicago and Eric to Seattle. The distance suited us all, I think. 1 year after Thomas's death, I held a small memorial service at the cabin, inviting a few neighbors who had known him from our Sunday drives, and the occasional older friends he had maintained contact with over the years. We shared stories about Thomas, many of which made me laugh or see him in a new light, as the young man he had been before grief and life's disappointments had made him more reserved. As the guests departed and twilight settled over the lake, I sat on the dock with a glass of Thomas's favorite scotch, a tribute to our quiet evenings together. "I miss you," I said aloud, my words carried away by the gentle breeze. "And I hope you know how grateful I am, not just for the material things, but for being the father I needed when I was most alone." The surface of the lake rippled with the evening wind, catching the last golden rays of the setting sun. In that peaceful moment, I felt a sense of closure, of coming full circle. Thomas had given me more than just security and a home. He had given me the confidence to stand up for myself, to claim my place in the world without apology. I was no longer the forgotten stepdaughter, the girl who didn't belong. I was Mia Reed, daughter of Thomas Walker, in all the ways that truly mattered. And that was a legacy more valuable than any inheritance could ever be. 5 years have passed since that day I found Thomas's letter. My business has flourished beyond my expectations, allowing me to travel and experience things I never thought possible. The cabin remains my sanctuary, my true home, a constant reminder of Thomas's love and foresight. Last month, I received a surprising email from Daniel. His wife had recently given birth to their first child, a daughter they named Olivia. Attached to the message was a photo of a tiny red-faced infant wrapped in a pink blanket. "I've been thinking a lot about family lately," Daniel wrote. "About what it means and how it's defined. I'm not ready to say I was wrong, but I'm beginning to understand that perhaps my father saw something in you that Eric and I missed. If you're ever in Chicago, Olivia would like to meet her. Aunt." The message brought unexpected tears to my eyes. It wasn't an apology, not quite, but it was an acknowledgment, a small opening in a door I had assumed would remain forever closed. I wrote back the same day, congratulating him and accepting the tentative olive branch he had extended. 2 weeks later, I received a similar message from Eric, less emotional, but equally significant. He was engaged to be married and wanted to know if I would consider attending the wedding. "It would mean a lot to have someone there who knew our father well," he wrote. "Someone who could tell stories about him that we never heard." I'm not naive enough to believe that these gestures will instantly transform us into a loving, unified family. There's too much history, too much pain on all sides for that kind of miraculous reconciliation. But they represent possibility, the chance that something new and better might grow from the ashes of our shared past. As I sit on my deck this evening, watching another spectacular sunset paint the sky in colors no artist could fully capture, I think about the strange and unexpected journey that brought me here. The loss, the betrayal, the discovery, the growth. All pieces of a puzzle I never expected to fit together so perfectly. Thomas's letter changed everything. Not just my financial circumstances, but my understanding of family, of love, and of my own worth. His final gift to me wasn't the money or even this beautiful cabin. It was the knowledge that I had been seen, valued, and loved unconditionally. Something every child, step or otherwise, deserves to know. The lake stretches before me, vast and shimmering in the fading light, a reminder that even after the most devastating storms, peace can be found. And in that peace, there is always room for new beginnings, for healing, and for the family we choose to create, however unconventional it might be. I raise my glass to the sky, a silent toast to the man who changed my life not once, but twice. First by marrying my mother and becoming my stepfather, and then by ensuring that I would never again feel like the forgotten child, the one who didn't belong. "Thank you, Thomas," I whisper to the evening breeze. "For everything." And somewhere, in whatever comes after this life, I like to think he hears me and smiles. Nothing could have prepared me for how different my life would become after finding that letter. I went from being the unwanted stepdaughter about to be homeless to having financial security and a beautiful lakeside property that my stepbrothers had tried to claim as their own. The irony still makes me smile sometimes. There are days when I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't found Thomas's letter. Would I have simply walked away with nothing? Would I have tried to fight Daniel and Eric through legal channels, likely losing because the will was clear in its exclusion of me? The thought makes me shudder, but it also makes me appreciate Thomas's foresight all the more. His decision to provide for me outside the will wasn't just about ensuring I received a fair share of his estate. It was about protecting me from the very conflict that might have destroyed what little peace our family had left. He knew his sons well enough to anticipate their reaction, their greed, their dismissal of me as not real family. And in his quiet, methodical way, he'd put plans in place years before his death to ensure I would be taken care of regardless. The most meaningful part of his gift wasn't the money or the property, though both changed my life dramatically. It was the letter itself, his words acknowledging me as his daughter in all but legal name, expressing the pride and love he'd rarely verbalized during his life. Those words healed wounds I'd carried since childhood, finally allowing me to believe I truly belonged somewhere, to someone. I've learned that family isn't always defined by blood or legal documents. Sometimes it's defined by quiet cups of coffee left on the counter, by saved newspaper articles, by Sunday drives to the lake. Sometimes it's in the silent gestures, the careful planning, the desire to protect someone long after you're gone. Thomas may not have adopted me legally, but in all the ways that truly matter, he chose to be my father, and I his daughter. The cabin itself feels like an extension of Thomas's love, a physical manifestation of his care for me. Each room holds small reminders of him, from the woodwork he admired during our drives to the kitchen layout that somehow mirrors his methodical approach to life. I've added my own touches over the years, of course, but I'd kept the essence of what he created, this haven by the water where I finally feel at peace. Last summer, I found an old photo album tucked away in the hall closet, filled with pictures of the property during its construction. There were shots of Thomas overseeing the workers, examining blueprints, and even one of him standing proudly on the newly built dock. On the back of this last photo, he'd written, "Mia's View, someday." The date on the photo was 3 years before his death, long before his illness. He had been planning this gift for me during all those Sunday drives, when I thought we were just enjoying the scenery. These discoveries continue to impact me, little breadcrumbs of love left behind for me to find as I make this space my own. Sometimes I wonder if he intentionally left these small treasures for me to discover gradually, extending his presence in my life beyond his physical years. It would be just like Thomas, careful and thoughtful even in his absence. As for the money, I've tried to use it in ways that would make Thomas proud. Beyond starting my business and establishing the scholarship fund, I've recently begun a mentorship program for stepchildren struggling to find their place in blended families. We offer counseling, support groups, and educational resources, all aimed at helping these children feel less alone, less other than I often felt growing up. The program has been more successful than I ever anticipated, and the stories I hear from the children and teenagers we work with often reflect my own experiences. The sense of displacement, the struggle for belonging, the complex emotions that come with navigating relationships that aren't defined by blood, but are no less real, no less important. In helping them, I've found another layer of healing for myself. Our flagship event is a summer camp held right here on the lakefront property. For 2 weeks each summer, the cabin and grounds are filled with the sounds of children laughing, sharing stories, and building connections with others who understand their unique struggles. We bring in family therapists, but the most powerful healing often happens in the informal moments, paddleboarding on the lake or roasting marshmallows around the fire pit Thomas installed years ago. "You've created something remarkable here," one of our counselors told me last summer, as we watched a group of teenagers engaged in an animated discussion on the dock. This is exactly what these kids need, a place where they don't have to explain themselves or justify their feelings. It gives me immense satisfaction to know that Thomas's gift continues to ripple outward, touching lives beyond my own. The property that was meant to be my sanctuary has become a sanctuary for others as well, a place of healing and belonging for children who, like me, sometimes feel caught between worlds. Daniel's daughter Olivia is now 2 years old, a precocious toddler with Thomas's eyes and stubborn chin. I've visited them in Chicago several times, our relationship still tentative but improving with each interaction. Daniel's wife Jennifer has been surprisingly welcoming, encouraging the development of what she calls extended family bonds. She needs all the family she can get, Jennifer told me during my last visit, as we watched Olivia stack blocks on the living room floor. And from what Daniel has told me, you were more of a daughter to Thomas than either of his sons were sons to him. That counts for something. During one visit, Daniel awkwardly handed me a small wooden box I immediately recognized as one that had sat on Thomas's dresser for years. "Found this when we were clearing out Dad's things," he explained, not quite meeting my eyes. "Your mom's name is engraved inside the lid. Thought you should have it." The box contained my mother's wedding ring and a few other pieces of jewelry I'd assumed had been lost or sold years ago. This small gesture of returning something that rightfully belonged to me felt significant, a tacit acknowledgment that perhaps the brothers' initial approach to the inheritance had been unnecessarily harsh. "He kept everything of hers," I said softly, running my fingers over the delicate gold band. "Even after all those years." Daniel nodded, a flash of something like regret crossing his face. "Yeah, he did." Eric's wedding last year was a small but elegant affair on the coast of Washington. During the reception, he pulled me aside, awkwardly offering a glass of champagne and an even more awkward attempt at conversation. "I've been reading Dad's journals," he admitted after a few minutes of small talk. "I found them in a box when we were cleaning out the house. He wrote about you a lot, especially in the later years." I hadn't known Thomas kept journals, and the revelation surprised me. "What did he say?" I asked, curious despite myself. Eric looked uncomfortable. "He was proud of you. Said you had a strength the rest of us lacked. Said you reminded him of Mom sometimes, the way you'd stand your ground when it mattered." I hadn't expected those words or the complex emotions they stirred in me. Thomas had rarely spoken of his first wife, and the comparison felt like another unexpected gift, another piece of the puzzle that was our complicated family. "He also wrote that he regretted not standing up to us more when we were younger," Eric continued, swirling the champagne in his glass without meeting my eyes. "About how we treated you. He said he should have done more to make you feel like part of the family, instead of just saying you were." The admission hung between us, neither an apology nor an accusation, simply an acknowledgment of the shared past that had shaped us all in different ways. We didn't speak more of it that night, but something had shifted, a first tentative step toward understanding. Life continues to surprise me. The bitter stepbrothers who once tried to leave me homeless now send birthday cards and occasional text messages. The home that Thomas secretly prepared for me has become not just my sanctuary, but a gathering place for new friends and, occasionally, for what remains of our fragmented family. Last Christmas, both Daniel and Eric brought their families to the cabin for a day of celebration. It was chaotic, occasionally tense, but also filled with moments of genuine connection. Watching Olivia excitedly unwrap her presents while Eric's fiancée, now wife, helped me prepare dinner in the kitchen, I caught glimpses of what might have been, of what might still be possible. The moment that touched me most deeply happened unexpectedly, as meaningful moments often do. I was showing Eric's wife around the cabin when we paused at the wall where I'd hung some of Thomas's old photographs. There was one of him in his younger days, standing proudly in his military uniform. "Dad was so different back then," Eric said quietly, having followed us into the room. "Before Mom died, before everything got so complicated." It was the first time he'd ever voluntarily mentioned his mother to me, acknowledging the shared loss that had shaped both our lives. Thomas had loved and lost 2 wives, and in that grief, perhaps he and I had found a connection that his sons, with their different experiences of loss, couldn't fully understand. He never stopped missing her, Eric continued, surprising me further. But he was happy with your mom too. I wasn't old enough to see it then, but looking back at photos, I can see it now. Thank you for saying that, I replied, unexpectedly moved by this small acknowledgement of my mother's place in Thomas's life, in our shared family history. Later that evening, as we gathered around the dining table I'd set with Thomas's old china, Daniel proposed a toast that brought tears to my eyes. To Dad, he said, raising his glass, who somehow managed to provide for all of us, even when we didn't deserve it. And to new beginnings. As we clinked glasses, I felt Thomas's presence more strongly than I had in years, as if he were watching over this unlikely family gathering with satisfaction. This, too, was part of his legacy. This fragile reconciliation none of us could have imagined when we sat in his study that terrible day, hearing the will that seemed to divide us forever. Thomas's photograph sits on my mantel, alongside one of my mother. Sometimes when the house is quiet and the lake outside is still, I imagine him watching over all of us, perhaps satisfied that his careful planning accomplished even more than he hoped. Not just financial security for me, but maybe, just maybe, the beginnings of healing for the family he left behind. The money matters, of course it does. It changed the trajectory of my life, opened doors that would have remained firmly closed otherwise. But the true inheritance Thomas left me was the knowledge that I was loved, that I belonged, that I mattered to someone who had no biological obligation to care for me, but chose to anyway. In the end, that's what family really means: the choosing, the staying, the loving without condition or requirement. As I watch the sun set over the lake tonight, casting long, golden fingers across the water, I think about the journey that brought me here, the painful moments and the joyful ones, the losses and the unexpected gains. I think about the little girl who once overheard, "She's not even your real kid," and the woman she became, stronger for having weathered the storms, more compassionate for having felt the pain of exclusion. The cabin creaks softly around me, settling in for the night as houses do. My dog Tommy sighs contentedly at my feet, his presence a constant comfort. On the coffee table, a half-finished design for my latest business project waits alongside an invitation to Daniel's house for Thanksgiving and a brochure for the next session of my mentorship program. My life is full in ways I never could have imagined on that terrible day when I sat in Thomas's study and heard the will that excluded me completely. The path from there to here was unexpected, sometimes painful, but ultimately healing. And it all began with a letter hidden in a desk drawer, a key taped to the back of a photograph, and a father's love that transcended legal definitions and blood ties. As the stars begin to appear overhead, I whisper once more into the gathering darkness, words that have become a ritual of sorts, a way of keeping Thomas's memory alive in this place he created for me. Thank you for choosing me, I say softly. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for making me your daughter in all the ways that truly matter. And in the gentle rustling of the pine trees surrounding the cabin, in the soft lapping of the lake against the shore, I like to imagine I hear his response, a quiet reassurance that I am exactly where I'm supposed to be, exactly who I was always meant to become. Stepdaughter. Daughter. Survivor. Heir to a legacy of love that no will could ever fully capture or contain. In the end, it is enough. More than enough. It is everything.